Sponsored by 1010 Podcasts.
The Celtic Exchange, a fresh insight on Celtic Football Club.
Welcome to episode 26 of the Celtic Exchange. This is Tino, and today I'm joined by Mif and James. So they say the best things in life are worth waiting for, and if that's really the case, then Ange Postecoglou may go on to be the best manager in Celtic's long and illustrious history. After an incredible 106 days without a permanent manager, we finally received official confirmation of his appointment on Thursday and can now look forward with some clarity on the season ahead. We may not have all the answers we're seeking for at this time, but it's a step in the right direction and it's set to be a frantic few weeks ahead for the club. Mif, after all the dark months of last season, the sun's shining, we've got a new manager. How are you feeling?
Hi Tino, hi James, hello listeners. I feel a lot better than I did. Just glad that it's done, glad that we have somebody in place, although it still feels a bit weird because we don't know when he's going to actually be here physically in the building. So I think until that happens, I probably won't feel as optimistic because then you'll know he's properly at work. We can only assume he is at the minute, but at least we know who the man is. In terms of, and I dare say we'll go into this in a bit more depth, whilst he is not a recognised and well-known name, that's only because he hasn't managed in Europe previously. When you actually look at his record, he seems to be quite fond of rebuild, and also the job that he's done with Australia, I think, makes him a genuinely viable, or made him a genuinely viable candidate for the job, because clearly he's went in there and made a squad of players punch above their weight against better opposition over a prolonged period of time. So similar theme you would imagine in terms of European progression for Celtic. If you get a good team on the park to do that, domestic progress should take care of itself. So I would go as far to say an exciting appointment.
Yeah, I'll take that. James, what about yourself? I know you had concerns at the time that it was taken for Eddie Howe. Now that Ange has been confirmed, are you going all in?
Genuinely excited. I think it is an exciting appointment given his background, his turnaround experience, the football philosophy he's got, and also the people whose careers he's touched, what they say about him after the fact. You know, they all speak very highly of him, as the way you hear kind of guys speaking about Brendan Rodgers. So I think there is the unknown. I think a lot of the kind of pushback, if there's been any from Celtic fans, is a bit of the Eddie Howe fallout, because it was so badly handled, so badly communicated, and there's been no time to build any real momentum for this candidate. But yeah, I think he's a real prospect for Celtic. He's got the football philosophy we all want to see, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, as am I. Now, before we get fully started on things today, I'd just like to take a minute to touch on things with Christian Erickson. As I'm sure most people will have seen, he collapsed during Denmark's game with Finland on Saturday, and for anyone watching, it really was quite a horrendous moment. Thankfully, medics and his teammates acted quickly, which probably saved his life, and latest reports are that he's now conscious and stable, which is of course great news. As a 29-year-old elite athlete, he's likely in the shape of his life, however, and it just shows you that you never really know the moment. In terms of what we do in the podcast here, we're obviously hugely passionate about Celtic, and like lots of others can get caught up in things at the best of times. Celtic are really important to us as they are to thousands of other people, but moments like this also remind us that nothing in life is more important than your health, and it really does bring everything into perspective. So our thoughts go to Christian Erickson and his family at this time, and we'd just like to express our best wishes for his safe and speedy recovery. So now moving on, as I say, we obviously I think as a group here, we're very excited about Ange Postecoglou. James, I believe you've been kind of looking into various things, and now that the shackles are off and you can allow yourself to fully immerse yourself in the various pieces of media that are around there, you picked up anything interesting in the last couple of days?
Yeah, so I kept my embargo on any rumoured Celtic managers because of Celtic's expertise in negotiating management contracts and players' contracts. So all the stuff that was going on about Howe and the exciting football style and training, didn't touch it. Same with Postecoglou. There was less time to do so, I suppose. But yeah, The Age of Ange is a documentary worth catching for anyone. That shows you a lot of insight into his mindset, his background. It's not varnished or overly varnished. It shows his adversity, where he wasn't doing well, how he came back from that. I think he's a very passionate guy, possibly quite an emotional guy. You know, he lives on his feelings. So that's one to watch for coming into the hotbed of Scottish football, especially when you're working under the Celtic board. So there's things to watch for there. But yeah, his football belief, his philosophies, they all come through really strongly in that documentary, and a few other bits and pieces I've picked up on him. So yeah, I like what I hear and I see about him.
Good. If you were saying, obviously, his CV does stack up pretty favourably. So I was even, comparing him to various guys, of course, but even our own Ronny Deila. So Ronny Deila came to Celtic after winning one title in Norway. Postecoglou has managed his country at World Cup. He's won an Asian Cup. He's won 5 titles across 2 countries. So he's won 4 titles in Australia. It's often reported as 2, but it was actually 2 before it was the A-League as well. So 5 titles across 2 different countries. He's been a coach for 25 years. It's not even a comparison, actually, when it comes to him and Ronnie Dyler. But where does he stack up for you now in comparison to the various other names that were touted? So, the madness that might have been Roy Keane, the untested Enzo Maresca, Chris Wilder, who succeeded then failed at Sheffield United. How do you feel now, with the information that's come to light in the last few days?
The one thing that always stood out to me regarding the whole pursuit of Eddie Howe, and I did reference this in a couple of podcasts, was his apparent lack of personality. He'd definitely be a guy that when it went to a lads' night out, didn't join in the round, he'd just go himself, buy his drinks himself. No doubt, man. No doubt. Whereas Big Ange looks like he's getting the shots in. You know what I mean? He's Big Ange is like, right lads, let's do it. So I think, all joking aside, Eddie Howe looks so studious and quite withdrawn. He seems a bit introverted. That's fine. Intense. All those things are great traits. But I think a job like Celtic, there's so many different facets to it. It is a global brand. I hate that terminology, but it's true. You'll have lots of different elements to the job rather than just purely being a coach and dealing with the media. The one thing I'm wary of is how abrasive Postecoglou seems to be and how that may affect his relationship with the board. I can only assume he's already stated what he wants and needs and he's going to be given that. Otherwise, why would he leave the job that he's coming to here? I hope he hasn't taken this job on a whim just because it's Celtic without any groundwork being done. I also think the timing of the whole letting us know about the Howe rejection, the season tickets and Postecoglou becoming common knowledge absolutely stinks. So they've obviously been sitting on the Howe rejection for a while, which I don't think's on. We all should have known that quicker to let us all kind of move on quicker. So whilst having a plan B is great, I'm happy that we had that sorted so quickly. There's something about the whole Howe rejection that just doesn't add up to me, and I think we deserve to know exactly what's went on there, because the stories that have come out about he just decided on that particular day that somebody for Bournemouth didn't want to move or something like that, I'm not having that at all.
Yeah, I think so too. I think in terms of what we've been told officially, you're right, Mif, it absolutely doesn't stack up for me. And again, it's one of these things we've talked a lot about the last 6 to 12 months and some of the things that have been going on, and maybe at some point in the future we'll find out. But yeah, at this moment in time, it doesn't stack up. So, but again, to move on, to look forward in terms of what Ange will bring, I think you're right, Mif. It would obviously be very hard for a coach like him, who's obviously ambitious and successful. It'd have been very hard for him to turn down a club like Celtic, regardless the terms. And that's what slightly concerns me. I wonder if he's conceding on a few points, if they've said your budget might not be what you'd hoped and different things. But the other side is he seems a strong and principled guy as well. So, there's some lazy assumptions that, he's just a yes man from people who didn't know who he was about a week and a half ago. So to now have that judgment is impressive, at best. I think he has a strong character. He certainly looks like that. And as you say, Mif, he's definitely got something about him. And that's what kind of gives me confidence that actually he might have said, great, this is a seriously exciting proposition for me, but I want this and I need that. And as you say, Mif, he's been involved in rebuilds before, and I wonder if, that all ties in. And again, like anyone, he doesn't want to come here and have a failure on his CV. So it's promising that, he'll come in and bring some exciting times, but with certain demands.
Just on that point as well, this could turn out to be quite a shrewd move by the board in terms of any noise coming out from Australia seems to be that it's bought a lot of goodwill. In Australia, it seems like almost like the whole nation's kind of supporting him because of the job that he'd done with the Australian national team, and now that willingness for him to do well. The fact that we've tried something completely different, even people that were really annoyed with the way that the season had panned out, the house situation had panned out, the season ticket kind of renewal process was rolled out, the freshness of the name and the link, because anyone else would have probably been a really divisive appointment for who was available, whether it be Mark Hughes, whether it be Roy Keane, any of those names, it felt a bit like the same old. Mm-hmm. What the board have done is they've pulled the rabbit out the hat, but with the links to the City Group and that as well, there's enough to concern me, but not so much that I'm more excited than concerned, because I think if you bring this guy in, back him, he's got a track record that shows he'll produce the goods. Yeah,
if they sign players and he gets early results, all this noise goes away, and it's a genuinely the kind of decision that brings everyone together. I can understand people's reticence at the moment because there's a lot of information not there. Once that starts to fill in with players and results, that'll drift away.
Yeah, I think any managerial appointment comes with risks. They all do. Even the best in the business come with risks, and there's no guarantee of any success. But I would say, as left field, Mif, it is something different, but it's also a calculated risk. He's not coming here after 25 years hanging about Australia, not really doing much. The guy's got a serious CV, so I think, as you say, James, the proof will be in the pudding. Once he starts to get on the training park and, we start to see what the first few friendlies look like, and ultimately when he starts to get his first couple of results, at that point, we start to get a real feel for who he is and how he operates and how the players have responded. So that'll really be where we find out how good or not he may be. What about his first interview? So that was really the first we'd seen in an official capacity when Celtic released that kind of dual interview with him first and then Dom Mackay. What was your initial thoughts when you heard, well, first of all, for Ange, when you heard him speaking?
A lot of things. You could tell he was excited, not in an overawed sense, but he was excited by the opportunity and the challenge ahead. But you could see a focus. He was calm. He had a plan. He was quite structured in terms of how he was going to go about things, what he'd done so far in terms of engaging with Dom Mackay. So, and I think he just put down the way he likes to go about his business, the way he likes his teams to be run. This guy was a captain when he was 21, so he is a leader, and that's the kind of thing you're going to see from him. So yeah, impress as much as these things are fairly PR driven. I wouldn't read an awful lot into it, but liked what I saw. Not knocking it for the rafters kind of thing, but he was just calm and focused.
Yeah, and I think he seemed quite sincere. He was excited, used that term, and I think you could see that, and it seemed quite genuine as well. He's got that kind of interesting Australian style as well, referring to, I think, Jerry McCulloch, his mate, and all this kind of stuff, and it was quite fun to watch. As you say, Mif, he's definitely got a bit of character about him, and I think success is one thing, but it's going to be a roller coaster along the way, isn't it?
Well, I don't think he's got to hold back, but I thought he spoke well. Like a guy with his experience probably should, if I'm being honest. He's confident. He seems to know exactly what he's getting into, and was quite happy to talk about how he wants his teams to play. Where Dyla sort of suffered when he came in was that he was completely unknown and wasn't really backed to any particular length by the board. You just felt he was sold short at almost every turn, and that there was a core of players working against him as well. That became apparent after a period of time. I don't think we have a situation where that will be allowed to happen again on the basis of the strength of the character that we've brought in.
Yeah, a core group of players going against Ange would all be transfer listed in short order.
I think he'd just level them, is the bottom line. So Ronnie Dyla, a nice guy, but I think Ange would just have guys by the scruff of the neck. The interesting thing is, we touched on it last week, but one of the first things he done when he came into one of his clubs in Australia, I need to check which one, he binned various high profile characters, including the likes of Bob Malcolm and Craig Moore and various guys that we know of in this part of the world. He also patched Harry Kewell from one of his clubs. So these guys are big names, and he's not afraid to go in there and stamp his authority. And I think the basic message is, if you're not on board with what we're doing, that's fine, but go and find another club. And actually that's what Celtic need at the best of times, because we've seen from some of the performances last season that would do them the world of good.
Yeah,
that is one of the main factors in our demise.
There was no cohesion amongst the players in terms of a driven goal, and it was quite easy get the 10, and they just didn't seem to have that focus. They all wanted different things.
So I think he has got that character to bin the big names. He will not be phased. He's been at World Cups, he's been in big dressing rooms, so whether you were the star man or a run-of-the-mill squad player, if you're not getting on board with the message, I think you're out, which is great to see.
Mm-hmm.
Even for small things, right? How amazing would it be to have Pete Rogic back? How amazing would that be? Do you know what I mean? If you get him back playing, oh man.
Mm-hmm. What I thought was interesting, so Celtic have obviously rolled out the PR offensive, as you'd expect, in the last few days, and there's been various new news stories coming out. So I think James Forrest, Stephen Welsh, David Turnbull, Callum McGregor have all been lining up to share their excitement at the new appointment, and we're looking forward to getting started, and all the, you could write them yourself, right, all the kind of cliched quotes. Interesting that Tom Rogic hasn't been rolled out. How hard is it to pick up the phone to an Australian player in your squad and say, what do you think of this guy?
Or a Greek player.
Your goalie, yeah.
I think he did reference Rogic in his interview. Postecoglou did, Tommy.
And Big Dukes.
Oh, Big Dukes, man, that's the winner. That is the winner. See, as soon as he mentioned that, I was like, sign me up.
Yeah.
That was when I definitely bought my ticket for the Ange training, man.
So obviously the players, as you would expect, are lining up to sing their praises. And listen, they should be excited. They should be excited at something fresh and something which is completely different from the Neil Lennon approach. So, there's no doubt there will be players buzzing to get back. And obviously some of the players are back. The non-international players are back this Thursday for their pre-season training. So I'm sure they're looking forward to getting started, albeit Ange won't be there. So I don't know if he's coming in from video call to take that session. in terms of the PR message, the club struck a masterclass by rolling out the maestro. You can't go wrong there, can you?
No.
Unifying.
I think he could have told me Bio was a player and I'd believe him. It's just an easy PR win, isn't it? And obviously, Paul McStay has spent a lot of time out in that part of the world, and his opinion does carry weight, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Like you say, Paul McStay could say anything about Celtic and would listen at the very least. But the fact that he's got experience of being out there, and I'm sure he'll have kept an eye on what's going on in football in Australia since he's been there in, 2010 or something. So that's a lot of Ange's progress and success. So, yeah, Celtic get a lot of marks down for their PR. That was one of the better ones.
I think Paul McStay behind kind of player software for monitoring.
Something along those lines,
monitoring player stats. So it was similar to Opta.
Yeah. He used to run a company called Midgebyte Creations, if I remember. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it in the podcast, but I have. We can delete that if need be. And yeah, he moved out that part of the world, I think, 11 years ago, just according to something I was reading. So yeah, I think he was involved somewhere in that world, but there's no doubt, he lived his finger on the pulse generally. His son's a player, isn't he? His son came back and played with Clyde and a couple of other clubs here and stuff like that. And the bottom line is, whatever the maestro says goes, and that's it. So that's how we're going to take that. As I'd mentioned within that interview on Thursday morning, we also heard for the first time officially from Dominic Mackay. Any first impressions on how that went?
No, again, I thought he came across reasonably well. One thing I was quite struck by, he's got a very impressive hairline, so that's gone nowhere anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing from your new CEO, above all else.
Well,
yeah, I agree though, Mif. I think he spoke pretty well, and there's been a lot of noise about how quiet he's been in the 4, 5, 6 weeks he's been in the door, albeit he's been effectively shadowing Peter Lawwell, who I believe has now left the building, which will open the door for Dominic Mackay to start his CEO job officially. It's not till 1st of July, but I'm sure he'll be carrying out some of those duties, and I think the club would have loved to have rolled him out with Eddie Howe. That was obviously the intention, but now he comes in with Ange, and it's so important that those two guys now form a proper bond and a proper relationship. They both spoke in similar terms in terms of building cultures and systems and processes that the players can be comfortable in and the club can start to grow in all areas. And they do seem to be similar minded. Obviously Dom's a bit younger. I think he's maybe 42, whereas Ange's 55. But I think that relationship's so important. One relationship which one position which still remains unfilled though is the recruitment. So whether it's a head of recruitment or a director of football, how concerning is that at this moment in time?
The way I looked at this, in the spring or even into last year, was there was 3 problems as such: the structure and the management, the board and the ownership of the club. So we've solved the manager position in the wrong order, maybe it's structure first, manager second, but the time was the time to just that was the opportunity to get him in. So it's screaming that there's no structure in place here of various positions, fitness, well-being, health, training, recruitment, the whole director of football suite. If we are going down that road, tell us what you're doing about it, because the communication's just not there. Mm-hmm. So rather than telling us about it, rather they just did it or started appointing people, because that's my real fear, is much like the mistakes made with Lennon, you just flung Strachan and Kennedy at him and said all the best. I mean, it's not going to wash. If Ange does fail, I think it won't be on his own merits. It'll be because Celtic haven't done the right things.
Yeah, that's the thing. Ange Postecoglou can't possibly succeed on his own. He can't come here, tactical genius or not, you can't come and do this as a one-man band. You need to have the support structure in place, and that's up to Celtic to support him. They've appointed him, but they now need to support him in various ways, with personnel, with finances, and with all sorts of other support structures. So, I mean, what do you feel on that, Mif? Do you think it's a concern given timescales? We're just about mid-June, and Ange can't possibly know the landscape here in terms of who he should be signing. So, who's assisting him with that just now?
Well, I think the structure of the club that's been an issue for a considerable period of time, because even under the last year at Rodgers, we knew signings were being made that weren't Rodgers. So, in many ways, the class of Rodgers and having his own backroom team and the footballing structure, we got away with that because he obviously did get his say on some signings. He did bring some of his own players in, but it was still happening where other players were being brought in that clearly weren't his signings. So there has always been a disconnect there. Even in our glory days, there was a disconnect between the board and the management. What we do have now is an opportunity, as a fresh start, and if somebody like Ange Postecoglou is going to be brought in for a period of time, I know it's a 12-month rolling contract, but that's not unusual for Celtic to offer those terms, then you need to give him a chance to structure that, or bring someone in to do that for him so that he can concentrate on just coaching the team. The fact that that's not happened, we've appointed him and he's in quarantine, is pretty baffling to me. I can only imagine that the Howe rejection and the football department restructure were in some way linked, and that we don't have an answer or the piece to that puzzle just yet. That's my suspicion. Here's hoping that we're waiting till Ange gets his feet under the table and helps with that process, so that it's somebody that he feels that he can work with.
You do get the impression they're scrambling about just now to find a director of football or a head of recruitment from the City group or otherwise. You know, they must be rolling out their black book just to see who's available for that just now. And as you say, Mif, it's concerning that they're obviously just the way the world at the moment. There is this quarantine period that Ange has to go through, and that's fine. There's nothing we can do about that. I suppose, given that he cannot be in the training field at this moment in time and there's no training to be done, at least he can be doing a certain amount of things digitally. You'd like to think there'll be all sorts of video files and recordings across him to say, here's how murder we were last year, and take a look at it for your own self. He can check out the personnel and the guys that he thinks he'll be working with, as well as, I'm sure, you know, there's a scouting department there that will be sending him various possibilities at this moment in time for him to cast his eye over. So there is a lot that he can do remotely, but the way of the world and all that stuff. But you really, just to give you confidence as much as anything, you'd love to see him just plank him in the Celtic way, get a scarf above his head and know that he's in there working with the people that he's going to be working with. So it is a bit troubling that he's not there just now. The non-international players, as mentioned, they report back for pre-season training on Thursday of this week, that's the 17th. But at this moment in time, it is very unclear whether this training will be taken by Margaret from accounts or by Johnny Mack and the faithful. So it's a concern. Obviously, the rumours are flying around that John Kennedy very much is remaining part of things, although I did read a report last night that he's now considering his future, which he should be, I think, for his own sake.
Interesting that came out. You know, that didn't come out for free. That's been placed, aye.
Yeah. I think for his own sake, John Kennedy will very possibly be seen, right, listen, now is the time for me to step out on my own terms and take it forward. Do you think that's the right move, James?
For Kennedy?
Well, for us.
Sorry, for everyone. And it really is. You know, I think Kennedy has got potential in the game. We'll never know if he stays under the Celtic cloak. You know, he's got to get out, do his own thing, work his way up the game like all good managers do, and see where he is in 4 or 5 years. You never know, you could see him back at Celtic in some capacity. But Kennedy and Strachan are stinking the place out as aligned to abject failure last year, and they need to be out of the building. Yeah,
I think you're very probably right there. In terms of Ange, obviously, the term that was used last year or a couple of years ago now was that Neil Lennon knew the city and how important that was. Ange does not know the city, although I believe in his interview he said he'd been to Scotland a couple of times. Do you think, Mif, it would be very beneficial for him to have someone of a Celtic mind with him? So Ronnie Dial obviously got John Collins and everything that comes with that.
Brendan Rodgers get Danny McGrain, is that right?
Well, up for debate. So do you think, and again, lazy assumption here by me and others, but Scott McDonald's a name that's obviously been doing the rounds because Australian, played for Celtic, get him in there. Do you think it's important that Ange has somebody like that though?
Don't think it has to be somebody Celtic minded.
No?
I don't. Someone that knows European football even would be acceptable. For me, the whole Celtic minded thing doesn't always necessarily get you anywhere. I mean, with Tony Mowbray and Peter Grant at the helm, albeit that I think they were undermined as well by the board at that time. So, the right people, that's all that matters to me. We've been there with the whole Celtic-minded thing, you know, with Neil Lennon and John Kennedy involved last season.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're two of the most, well, we thought they were two of the most Celtic-minded people you'd get, but I think, unfortunately, for Neil Lennon, he's sullied that a bit, especially with that interview that he did recently. So, no, I think it's just the right people, and to contradict myself completely, the one name that had been mentioned that I did like was Sean Maloney. Mm-hmm. Anytime I've heard Sean Maloney speak, he comes across as a kind of level-headed, intelligent guy, and I think the experience he's had with Belgium would stand him in real good stead. He went down and played in England as well, so you would assume he'd pretty good contacts. And I would also like, if it was possible, I think he moved back to take the Ireland job or the Ireland coaching job because he's family. But Damien Duff, there was a direct correlation between Damien Duff leaving and the squad spirit and the attacking flair in the team disappearing.
Yeah, the Sean Maloney one is an interesting one, and it does keep coming back up. Actually, we had an interview on the radio just last night. He was on with Tom English on Sportssound or Radio Scotland, and it's interesting the timing of that because you don't hear a lot from Sean Maloney, and we haven't heard much of him in recent years while he's been working with Belgium. But it's interesting that now, you know, is the PR offensive on to get him favourably thought of in the eyes of the Celtic fans or the ears of the Celtic fans, because he speaks loads of sense, and it was a very good interview and it's worth checking out. You'll get it on some sort of playback.
I don't think I could bring myself to listen to Tom English.
Yeah,
maybe it's annoying. It's good though.
That is good. So Sean Maloney, as I say, does speak very well, and I just wonder if that's him being primed for post-Euros stepping into some sort of role. And I would be okay with that, and I'd certainly be okay with Damien Duff.
Do you not think that Tom English just sounds pretty much permanently patronising when he's talking. It's his tone that kind of let out.
He was constantly searching for wee Snyders, and where Maloney was almost most impressive in the interview was just sidestepping it every time.
No, I think that's just English's MO. Is he just even when he talks, he's almost like dismissive in tone about everything.
Yeah.
I don't mean, I'm not talking about a Celtic perspective. I just find it baffling.
Yeah, as if he's some kind of sage.
You're like, just if you're asking somebody a question or you're speaking to, asking for somebody's opinion, at least hear them out. Don't kind of talk it down before they've said it. But anyway,
Yeah, if you're unsure if that's how Tom English operates, spend 5 minutes on his Twitter page. Just very, very patronising and a questionable style at best. So anyway, enough about him. So yeah, interesting to see if Ange is allowed to bring someone in, certainly of his own backroom team and guys he trusts, and if also someone is thrust upon him of a Celtic nature. But you're right, any good coach should be able to go to any part in the world and say, I don't need a guy from Madrid or Paris or wherever I'm going. I've got these 3 guys that I really trust, and that's the way it goes. The most important thing is to be a quality operator as opposed to someone who knows the city and who knows Celtic. In terms of the more practical elements, so we know that the team goes in a pre-season training camp to Wales, I think between the 5th and the 14th of July. There's a few fixtures in there, so they play Sheffield Wednesday on the 7th, Charlton Athletic on the 10th, and Bristol City on the 14th. So that'll be the first chance to get a proper look at how he sets up and how the team responds to his initial very, very early stages of his Celtic tenure. Are you excited for those games, Mif? I know you've got an affinity with Bristol as a city as well, so maybe you can touch on that, but are you excited for those fixtures?
Well, yes, because it's the first glimpse you're going to get of the structure of the team, and even though it won't mean much and it'll be very, very early days, it'll give you an idea of just formations, even some as basic as that, formations, and players such as, I think off the top of my head, somebody like Mikey Johnson's somebody that stands out to me who's it seems at a bit of a crossroads in his Celtic career. You would think he's going to need to hit the ground running to impress a new manager. Somebody like Stephen Welsh, who has had a decent season, I would say. He's certainly not let himself down, but is he actually going to be good enough to be the number 1 or number 2 centre half for a whole season again? Tom Rogic, who we've already mentioned, I would have liked to have thought Cham would have been another one back with a point to prove, but he looks like he's on his way out the door. Will the likes of Shved and Bio be there as well? There's just loads of questions around the squad at the minute, so it'll just be interesting to see who's there, who's playing, how they set up, all those types of things. And also here, because invariably it'll happen, you'll get murmurings coming back out, whether that be positive, negative or otherwise. So just excited to get to that point, but it still feels like that's quite a bit away, and the lack of movement. We've also got Liam Short coming as well. Should mention him as well. We've got Liam Short coming for Sheffield Wednesday. So again, the likes of him, Lee O'Connor, will they be coming back? Will they be in the first team squad? Will they be in the development squad? It's just, there's loads of these kind of different questions kind of floating about, but I just hope it doesn't drift to that point. I just hope there's other things happen in between now and then, because to me it just feels like we're just drifting.
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the top of the introduction there, it's set to be a frantic few weeks, and it should be. There's got to be signings going on. So the transfer window just opened there on Wednesday of last week, the 9th of June, and that's open till the 31st of August. There's got to be serious activity, and pretty soon, and that's on the park and off, as we'd mentioned. There's lots of appointments to be made by Celtic, so watch this space for that. James, this next question I'm going to put to you, because I know you've got fairly strong opinions on it. So question is, well, you mentioned with loads of various players at Crossroads, and one you didn't even mention, and it's a big one. Would it be madness? Out, and you've not heard it yet, but you know it's coming. Would it be madness for Postecoglou not to fully assess Lee Griffiths in person, see where he's at, and then make an informed choice on whether he thinks he can get something from him? Now, Lee Griffiths is in his own charm offensive just now. He's put up the post on Instagram at him
in the gym,
working in the gym with his PT. Now, my sister is working my PT at this moment in time, but I don't expect her to be leading the line for us in any upcoming Champions League qualifiers, so I'm not sure how much that says. But James, over to you. Thoughts on Lee Griffiths?
Yeah, and I think you're very right that he should go in with an open mind on every single player who's signed to Celtic at the moment, Griffiths included. It'll take him 10 minutes to work out he's not got the strength of mind to be an Ange player, and Barkas will fall into that category as well. So it's not about his ability. We know Griffiths' ability inside out. He's the player that, to coin the phrase, I'm not angry with him, I'm just disappointed with him. He's let us down so many times. He's in the gym now giving us this pish. Where was he this time last year when 10 in a row was coming up, and he's a guy who knew what it meant, and he turned in that absolute drivel of a season. So for me, it's way too late. I think Ange will take 10 minutes to work him out and ship him out.
So how do you feel about Lee Griffiths?
Take or leave him. And it's unfair because Griffiths has become the lightning rod for all the players of that mentality, that 10 in a row was there on a plate for them, and they just didn't show up because they didn't have the mindset for it.
Yeah. What about yourself, Mif? I mean, I've got to be honest with you, and I think I'm quoting a couple of podcasts recently saying, against my better judgment, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I don't know if that's a hard
You done that before?
Have I given him the benefit of the doubt before? Yeah, and he's thrown it back in my face. Yeah. He's treated me like a whatever.
Oh, nearly.
Yeah, but I do want to see him given a chance. I want them all to be given a chance, because last season was just a catastrophe for a variety of reasons, and I want
because of those guys,
clean slate. Not just because of those guys. There's so much going on. But what are you out on Griffiths?
Oh,
tread carefully.
I think this will come down to the manager, and I think, like James mentioned there, I don't think it's going to take him too long. Dare I say, he might even already have an idea if he's looked at the history of Lee Griffiths and the fact that he's not always been readily available in prime condition. You mentioned previous big names that they'd shipped out of places where he went in. You know, it's all set up for Griffiths to be shown the door, I think, when Postecoglou comes in. So that the work in the gym, I think, might be for going and joining Bruni up Aberdeen or heading back to
I need to add, I'm as big a Griffiths fan as anyone's been for years and years. I think he's a great guy. He's fun in the dressing room. He's a great player, but just not turned up. Interesting.
A player you'd mentioned, I kind of forgot about him as well, as a lot of us had, was Barkas. So obviously there's the Greek connection there between him and Postecoglou, and that might help him settle in some way. Do you think he gets another chance at number one, or do we need a new goalie?
He might get a shot at number two.
That's it. $5 million number two, yeah.
Again, I think it's coming down to stature and personality with Barkas. He just doesn't seem to have that. I seem to have been linked with Matt Ryan for Brighton. I would be delighted with that as a sign.
Well, that's interesting, Mif, and I know you obviously study the agenda before every show, but Matt Ryan is next up on the list. So there's obviously a lot of headlines about him at the moment. He's currently the Brighton goalie, or registered to Brighton, and is so for another year, but he's been on loan at Arsenal. I think he only get 3 games for Arsenal. Have you seen much of him? If I can say for sure if I've seen much of the guy.
I've seen more of him than I have of the agenda, put it that way. Put it this way, we would have been in a much better place last season if Matt Ryan had been the keeper.
Yeah.
He's better than Bain, he's better than Barkas. From my eyes, when I'm watching football, you know, quite an athletic goalkeeper. Not the tallest or the biggest, if memory serves me right, but certainly quite a commanding presence, and was a fairly reliable stick for Brighton when they progressed through into the Premier League and stayed there as well. You know, so he showed up quite well there. Although I think they've then went for a Spanish goalkeeper they've now got in. Name escapes me. Brighton's goalkeeper, who has been really impressive, but he's quite young. And I think that was why Ryan went to Arsenal, because of the quota that you need to have. I think I might be talking absolute mince here, but he didn't play much for Arsenal. Probably, I would say he's in a similar bracket in terms of where his career's at as Foster. It would be coming up and playing regularly. It would be the attraction he got coming up to Celtic.
For a guy he knows.
To play for a coach that he knows.
That's the question. So he's 29, I think, and sounds like it'll be a straight out money over ambition. Arsenal's where the money is. Celtic's where he can possibly, win some silverware and take things to a different level in terms of playing in Europe and whatever else. And Ange did manage him, so I think he had him certainly during that time, 2014-15, where it was World Cups and then Asian Cups and stuff. So they will know each other very well. Again, this might just be people putting 2 and 2 together when it's Australian and Australian.
That's how it kind of felt to me. But I think that the link itself is noteworthy because it would immediately solve a problem that we have.
Yeah, it certainly would.
I'm glad it's at least been talked about.
Yeah, and it should be, because the goalkeeping situation seriously needs addressed. There's several other players who will be familiar to us that have been quoted recently, and there seems to be a fair bit of noise. So another Australian, or certainly an Australian international, was Martin Boyle. There's chat about him again. I think he did sign a new deal which takes him to 2023 at Hibs, but I believe there's a release clause if a certain amount of money is paid. Would he be good enough in your eyes? I'm really not sure if he's good enough for Celtic, but who knows? What do you think, Mif?
I would welcome Martin Boyle, most definitely.
I think there's 2 things. His contract apparently says $500,000 for non-Scottish teams and $3 million for Scottish. I question the legality of that as a contract in terms of where he can work and where he can't. But let's assume it was 500,000. Yeah, for that kind of money and what budget he's going to have, I think that's worth putting in. I've not seen enough quality from him that you were going to spend $3 million a year budget on him. $500,000, yeah, probably.
Okay. There's another couple of names as mentioned. So Aaron Hickey, we know well enough from, he was in Celtic's academy, went to Hearts, done well, and he's currently at Bologna. I think he's done okay there. He's not set a heather light, and he's only a young guy, of course, but I think he's played 18 times, and there's a suggestion that he could be coming back. So we seriously have a problem in the fullback department, no doubt about it. We've got some cover in terms of Greg Taylor and maybe Bolingoli at left back. We've got next to nothing at right back, so there's obviously a concern there. But Aaron Hickey coming in, is that the kind of sign you'd be comfortable with?
I'd rather have Doig for Hibs.
You've said that a lot. So Arsenal, funnily enough, seem to be tracking him. So there's the merry-go-round's obviously in full flow, and there's various players floating about, and it remains to be seen who we can feasibly get a hold of. The other name, just the last one I touch on at the moment, frequently touted, and he's obviously got a big few weeks ahead, is Kevin Nisbet. I'm quite keen on that one. I think he could certainly make up one of our strikers, if not, a backup, and potentially, go on to be the number one striker, because again, like all areas of the park, there's serious gaps, and I think he would slot into what we do.
We don't have any other international strikers, do we?
Yeah, and if you look at the job at hand, this next 12 months ahead, it's about reasserting yourself in Scottish football, and Nisbet allows you to do that. Might let you jump up to Europe the year after, but you can maybe solve that problem next year. This season's about getting back into Scottish football.
Well, that's it. We know that you go straight into the Champions League if you win the league this year, so I know we said it flippantly last year, Europe doesn't matter, it's all about the league, but really, just on a financial point of view, just focus on domestic and win the league this year, and the fruits of the Champions League are all there for you to build your squad and further develop. So I think you're right, James. I think Kevin Nisbet would allow us to do that, because I think he got 18 goals last year. He knows the landscape here and he knows where the back of the net is, and he's also scored his first international goal there. So I don't think there's any lack of confidence and enthusiasm from him as a young guy, and I think he could really take his game to the next level at Celtic.
You couldn't be the only striker signing. You would be one of at least two.
I mean, at the moment we're left with Ayeti and Bayo as the known strikers. Edward will be off. Griffiths, who knows? And obviously we lost Klamala. So yeah, we need to get a number of strikers in, and Kevin Nisbet, I'd certainly be happy with that. Have you heard any other names doing the rounds? Is there anyone else that's been touted at this moment in time? Or
not really, and it's not something I look for.
One thing I'd like to look at is the ongoing question for me, and I think it's such an important question, but the captaincy at Celtic next year. It seems to be at this moment in time that it's Callum McGregor by default. I suppose right now we're without club captain, which isn't great in a general sense, but Callum McGregor seems to be the name mentioned just now just because, and he's obviously deputised for Brunei at different times. I read the stat today, I think it was, that McGregor, he's averaged 58 games per year for club and country for the last 5 years. I was going to say, is it admirable or is it madness?
It's madness on his agent, himself and his managers to make him play that much football. You ask a footballer who, do you want to play? He says aye. I've said this before, but every single manager, nobody seems willing to give him a break for any reason. And it'll be interesting to see if he's a starter for Steve Clarke in the next few games.
The most remarkable thing about that is the context of this season and how poor he's been. He clearly needed a rest and taking out the fire line.
Yeah.
That's more of a bone of contention for me. Rodgers felt he couldn't do it without him. That's fine. Same as he felt he couldn't do it without Tierney. That's fine. Managers make those decisions. But they were winning most weeks and playing brilliant football. This season was a completely different case. It was like a different player.
Yeah, just burnt out.
Give him the rest that he needs.
Yeah, he's not going to get it.
And what about his abilities as a captain, Mif? Would you be happy with him as club captain next year?
I don't think he's a captain, but if he gets it by default, then that's more to do with how terribly we've managed the squad than it is to do with Callum McGregor. If you've not got any guys that are captain material in there, therein lies your problem.
Yeah, as you look through the squad, there's next to no options. The only one I could think of, and listen, I would prefer him to Callum McGregor, and I also know your thoughts on this guy, James, but Chris Jullien would be a better captain for me.
Silenced.
Very inspiring, seeing your captain doing forward rolls after a centre forwards nudged them.
Yeah, Superman.
Nah.
I understand that. I think he is. He's got a bit of leadership about him,
Yep.
Jullien, right? For as much as I think he's an average footballer, he has got a bit of leadership about him, and that's what Ange is going to be looking for. And he's, I think the captaincy distracts McGregor from his game and his own abilities because he's looking for other jobs to do on the park instead of his job of playing football. I think Ange, having been a captain himself, leaders know leaders. He'll meet McGregor and he'll think him a really good addition to the squad, as in a senior addition to the squad, but not a captain. I don't think Celtic's captain currently plays for Celtic.
I think and hope that's the case as well. I mean, Big Jullien, he's mad for the Instagram and loves an inspirational quote. And I mean, really in the modern game, that's the most important thing, is it not?
I would agree. I don't think Celtic's captain's currently in the point squad.
And I think the signings we make need to have, as well as signing a captain, the other guys need to have captaincy attributes.
Yeah, I also think a team should be full of captains. We've gone on about this time after time, but it shouldn't just be one guy who's the main man and he has to drag everyone through. There should be a culture where you've got a number of leaders in the park and there's, guys in every department. And obviously there's certain guys by their nature who won't be captains. It's not a Mikey Johnson thing, it's not a James Forrest thing. I think it's not a Callum McGregor thing either. But if you've got 4 or 5 others who can pull you through when times are tough, then I think that's a real sign of a team that's heading in the right direction. And I think Ange will be the kind of guy that does bring in strong characters. He'll know he needs them. He is trying to change the culture, and there's a whole new shift here and a whole new way of playing football and approaching things. And for that to work, the easiest way to do it is to bring in guys that you know will slot into the system. And I believe that the current crop of players at Celtic, albeit by number, they're not strong enough as well. I don't think the current crop can quite work into Ange's system. So I think he'll bring in guys to do that job for him. So a very brief piece of news. Ismail Soro made his debut for Ivory Coast on Saturday, coming on as a late sub in a nothing each draw with Ghana. Sounds like a decent game, defences on top and all that. How important could he be next year? He had some mixed performances, but there was reasons for optimism.
A lot of self-belief as a young guy. So I think that's what Ange's looking for in players. He's got talent, but he's got self-belief. I think he's raw, really raw, but I think he could be formed into something good.
I think he's raw, but I don't necessarily think he's the defensive midfield player that we think is. I think he's maybe got a bit more licence to get forward as well. So I think we sort of pigeonholed him last season just as it's either him or Brown that play. Yeah. I don't necessarily think that has to be the case. But again, someone who is going to be our player next year, one of the few that we know is actually going to be in the building. Look forward to him coming back and hopefully showing Ange's worth a place in the squad. Yeah,
and I think any player like that, as you say, James, he is quite wrong. He's definitely very young, but with proper coaching, anybody like that can develop, and high hopes that he'll go on to do something decent for us in the season ahead. And just on that, Mif, I'll come to you first. What's your optimism levels at now for the season ahead? Obviously, big news with Ange, he's in, and that's concrete. Lots of things still undetermined, but we'll find out in the coming weeks. How are you feeling about it all?
Well, obviously I was getting carried away when Big Ange was appointed, and I had to say, winning the league quite comfortably. But reality's kind of struck, and I touched on it earlier. Until he's actually here and taking the team, and there's movement around the squad, and we know who's staying and who's going, I think it's really hard to gauge. There is that blind optimism that I have. It's just so hard to say. The first small steps in the road to recovery have been taken. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
We've got somebody in. He's our man. Great. Now make the changes that need made.
With yourself, James, are you excited? I mean, as Mif says, a few big signings in the right direction that'll really start to change the picture. How do you feel?
Yeah, signings are key. I mean, I've said all the way through, this period that the gap isn't as wide as it's written. Again, Rangers could have got us a worse structured time, manager, the whole shebang. So I don't think it's that wide. Any manager who can galvanise what he's got, add talent to it, can close that gap and go past it quite quickly. Celtic will win the league next year.
I like it. Mark that, lads. So 13th of June 2021, chalk it down. So the appointment of Ange Postecoglou finally signals the beginning of a new era for Celtic Football Club. Yes, there's been some mixed responses from fans, and it might not have been everyone's first choice, including the club. However, he's here now, he's one of us, and we'll be getting fully behind him as he looks to do what he does best and get us back to winning titles. The hard work starts here. Thanks to Mif and James for joining me on today's show, and as always, our thanks to you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, please continue to support us by following us wherever you get your podcasts, and by sharing this episode with anyone you think will enjoy it. You'll also find us on Twitter at Celtic Exchange and on Instagram at the Celtic Exchange Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.
Sponsored by 1010 Podcasts.